He's probably in his 70s now, if he's still around, I'm not sure, but great, really fantastic guy, very, what's the word, I don't know what the word is, but he made it was at a Whitney Biennial, and he made a mirrored room. You walked into the room, closed the door, there was a glass mirrored table in it, and it just repeated itself.
Every surface was a mirror.
Everything was a mirror, so when you walked in the room, you saw repetitive images that went on ad infinitum. And he was after the same thing. He was trying to approach the infinite, to let the mind be expansive, to let the mind, run free as far as it could go. And that was what he found at that moment to be his connection to the infinite. Robert Smithson, the guy who did the spiral jetty in Salt Lake, did these little tiny things with mirrors. He called them non-sights, which was about negative space. And actually, I think he said something like that the success of his work was in the interstitiary spaces between events, negative space. So he was a big influence, and I made pieces in those days which were really fabulous. They were very fun pieces for me and very exciting to make. They were totally guerrilla. It was like guerrilla art. I mean, I put a piece that I have on my website on the entry page is of a desk on top of a building in Manhattan.
I saw that. Yeah.
And I was building telescopes to allow the mind to expand, to see farther, which was my idea, literally, of explaining how I saw art. It was a tool to allow us to see farther and clearer. And so I built this. I took a desk that was actually a kind of a great story. It was really one of my first sculptures, other than my ceramics, which I made when I was a potter. But I rented a loft in Brooklyn because I couldn't afford to live in Manhattan. I was 24 years old. I was teaching at the Brooklyn Museum Art School. And I rented a 3,000 square foot loft in Brooklyn. I remember it was $300 a month in the early 70s. And it was a totally empty, giant cavernous space in the Badlands, what was then the Badlands of Brooklyn. And it was basically Spanish street gangs and some artists. And there was nothing in the loft but an old wooden desk. And it was like an executive's desk. It was a mahogany desk. And it was the only thing in the loft. It was really freaky. But that was my first idea for sculpture, and the desk was there. So talk about keeping your eyes open and watching for the signs. That was pretty wild. And this wooden mahogany desk was in there, and I was making telescopes. I was actually drilling out trees and embedding the telescopes into the dead trees, but I was drilling out the trunks of trees and turning the trees into telescopes and planting them back in the forest, which was, it was kind of a nature worship thing. It was almost witchcraft. It was bizarre, but so I got this brainstorm to do, and it was very stream of consciousness, and I took my telescope idea and I drilled a hole in the desk, and we built a steel armature, and we turned the executive's desk into a periscope. And so I embedded a high-powered telescope, lenses, into the thing. And then I realized I wanted to put it somewhere where you could see something, because it was inside the loft. And we made it so you could turn it and all this stuff, we made like a universal joint so you could move it around. And I wanted to get it out into space so it would become more of an object, and it would allow people to see farther out over the landscape. But I realized it wouldn't, if you could fit it through the door, but there was nowhere to go with it. But there was a hatch in the loft up to the roof, and there was a metal, like a fire escape stair to get there, and then there was a big window, and the only place it would fit through was the door down the stairway, which didn't get me anywhere. And I wanted to get it to the roof because I had spent time when I first moved to the city on the roofs doing sketches, because as I told you yesterday, the rooftop was a place where we had rediscovered the horizon. So I put the telescope together with this desk which I had found, and I hired the Spanish street gangs, or the Spanish street gangs. I can't tell you what the name of the gang was, and had no money to pay them, but so I went out to my father's house and I cleaned out his bar and I took all his, and he wasn't giving me money at the time. He wanted me to be self-sufficient, so I took all the booze in the house. I put it in a truck, which I had an old Chevy Blazer, and I just took all the booze out of the wine and all this good, whatever he had. And I hauled it into this. I said, listen, I got no money to pay you guys, but I'll give you all this stuff. I need you to, we're going to strap furniture dollies to the desk, throw it out the window, and we're going to haul it up to the roof and put it up on top of this metal armature that I had built. And so that's what I did. I hired this street gang. I paid them with liquor, because it's all I had. And we hauled the desk on the rollers up the side of the building. If you can imagine, hauling the desk with the furniture dolly, this gigantic, very heavy, well, it must have been 300 or 400 pounds, up the edge, over the cornice of the building. We got it up onto the roof. We hauled it up about, I don't know, it wasn't that high, it was about another 8 feet above the line of the roof. And that's where that picture came from. And I got arrested for it because I got arrested for it because the people in the neighborhood thought we were stealing furniture from the building. And the police came up the fire escape stairs, the fire escape ladder, and they had their hands on their guns and everything, and they said, look, we're getting complaints here that there are people, that you guys are stealing furniture from the building. I said, no, I'm a tenant here. I rent the top floor, and I teach up the road at the Brooklyn Museum. You can call them and check it out. And this is an artwork. It's a participatory art piece. And they said, come on, you got to be kidding. Anyway, they made a few phone calls. Chief, this guy says you're ever. And I think we were able to keep it up for about a week or two. And of course, at that point, all I owned, I think, was a $350 truck. So, I wasn't really, I had no kind of concept of what personal risk was, other than bodily risk.
Nothing to lose.
No, I had nothing to lose. And but that was a piece that was so far out. I had offers to rebuild it since then, and I said, I do all kinds of stipulations, so it hasn't happened. But the end of that story is, we actually had to. We got art critics out there, and they wouldn't climb up this little ladder to sit in the desk, but that's what happened. We would climb up the ladder that I built into this tripod, climb into the desk chair, and you leaned over the desk, and there was a little rip, a tear in the desk blotter, and underneath the rip was the eyepiece of a telescope, camera obscura, I guess, like that kind of a thing. So you looked into the tear of the desk blotter, and you saw the Statue of Liberty, which was 5 miles away. And that defined the trajectory of my work for the next 35 years. And that piece, was like, I didn't kind of think it at we just were doing stuff. I had friends who were doing all kinds of things. I had a friend named Gordon Mata Clark, who was the son of Roberto Mata, the painter, the Spanish painter. And he was cutting holes in buildings. That was so crazy too. And they were his pieces were some of the most amazing. The Chicago Institute of Contemporary Art had a huge retrospective. He's dead, but they had a huge retrospective of those cuttings, where he was cutting, and it was the same. He was after the same thing. He wanted to set us free, and he wanted to free architecture from, he wanted to open it up, and so he exploded the buildings by cutting sawzall holes in them, and he allowed your vision to continue. So we had a kind of a kinship with that work, but that desk was very seminal, pivotal, whatever, and it was a Duchampian aesthetic. Duchamp was my idol; it was everybody's idol, and I loved Smithson. Duchamp to me was the greatest force of 20th century art. There was Picasso as the great painter with making beautiful objects, but Duchamp was the thinker, and he freed us from corporeal reality, you know, and he was much more spiritual, and that's where I wanted to go. Uh, and now I'm much more attracted to guys like Noguchi, who probably he was much more grounded in not Noguchi maybe, but Noguchi's teacher, literally and figuratively, who was Brancusi. Noguchi was a student of Brancusi's, and basically stole from him. And but Brancusi was the guy. I mean, to me, he's the most brilliant formal artist, sculptor of all time. But the amazing thing, again, to tie that back into, and it's good to have mentors, and I think it's good to identify your mentors, because once you do, you're free of them in a sense. You have to come up with you can steal, you can learn, but then it has to filter through you and become, your thing. So, I forgot where I was going there, but anyway.
Good. Okay, and I